last time where we'll open it up towards the end. All right, we have a special dedication tonight to a very special lady's father. And Sarah Towell has been a student and a learning partner of mine for many years. I've been privileged and honored. And I got to see what her father built and produced. Joseph Catton, Alav Shalom, Yosef ben Sarah. I didn't really know him. I learned about him through his daughter. I had the privilege of speaking and memorializing him in one of our classes many years ago. And based on Sarah's input and her expressions about her dad and the things he loved most in life, hi, Annie, and the things he
Hi.
loved most in life, we focused at the time on music, and we spoke at length about Joseph Catton, Alav Shalom's, Mr. Catton's love of music, promotion of music, promoting it to his family, and so on and so on. And at the time, we spent the whole class and we discussed the place of music in God's creation. And it's very interesting because music is a completely different place in the world, in our reality. Music is not physical and it's not quite spiritual. It's that unique thing that sits in the middle. And we mentioned at the time a number of the unique elements that that brings with it. I wanted to touch on a few of those things tonight as we dedicate this class to Yosef ben Sarat, to Mr. Catton. There's a beautiful passage in the Gemara that says as follows. Amar Rabbi Tanchum. Rabbi Tanchum says that God wanted to make Chizkiah the king, he wanted to make Chizkiah the Mashiach. And the rabbis asked why. And the answer was that Chizkiah was extremely strong as a king. And under his leadership, they were learning Torah on the most complicated topics all over the land of Israel on an unprecedented level. So the rabbis said, let's dedicate Chizkiah as Mashiach, not him specifically, but those who come from his lineage. The other opinion was, no, we should make the lineage the great grandchild someday of David HaMelech, the king, the Mashiach, the Messiah. And why? And the answer is because he celebrated life with song. So the presentation is shocking. 1 second. Chizkiah built Torah. David also built Torah, but he built song. And our rabbis say that Shirat Hayadut Nishmata Netzach, that the song of Judaism, the song in Judaism, is the way the neshama expresses itself. So who ends up winning out on the choice for the lineage of Mashiach? David does, fascinatingly. There's one other beautiful piece that I wanted to highlight tonight as a reach back in memory of Mr. Catton and a celebration of his life. There's another piece in Masechet Sanhedrin that says something beautiful as well. It says that Rav and Shmuel were the antagonists. Those were the two giants who learned Torah together and butt heads oftentimes. Rav says that the Torah was created for Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm sorry, the world was created for Moshe Rabbeinu because he would be bringing Torah into the world. The Shmuel says, no, the world was created for David HaMelech. Why? Again, because David HaMelech is bringing song into the world. In the end, they agree, these two protagonists, and say that the world was created for Mashiach because Mashiach blends Torah and song, blends Torah and music. So as we dedicate this class tonight to Yosef ben Sarah, and in honor of our Sarah, Sarah Towell, we want to remind ourselves that music is this unique dispensation that we get. All kinds of music, all types. It can touch the soul like very few other things. And nowadays, with music so readily accessible, everything, classic and all types from all different countries, and of course, our own Pizmonim and song, it's nice to remind ourselves about the place that it plays in our lives and to remind ourselves of someone who was very dear and his love of the same. So, Tiyeh Nishmatot Rab Tzura Chaim. Amen. Okay.
Amen.
We're going to speak tonight about another unique, I believe, gift of Hanukka. And like we've done in the past, we're going to reach back to what we've learned and we're going to push forward, and everything will be practical. So we want to step up into the world of new ideas, hopefully things we haven't heard before, built on what we have shared in the past. And we want to walk away with a practical application of that. And as we've said throughout, being that we want to own these ideas and we want to use them, we're going to make sure that we all have a chance to share our ideas, challenge them, and ask the questions we need to. So let's go back. We started when we said that the pasuk, the verse, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz, in this period of Reshit, God created heaven and earth. We questioned that verse a lot, and we took a number of things out of it, one of which was that et hashamayim v'et haaretz, the heavens and the earth, means that God created the world with a structure where things that have no practical basis of synergy would be able to synergize. In other words, the world, which is physical, practical, beginnings and endings, would be able to communicate with something completely non-physical. It's like us imagining that a cardboard box could communicate with us. A cardboard box is completely different than we are. So to imagine that I could sit with a cardboard box and communicate with it, it would be silly. It's impossible. Oh, I can communicate with an animal. I can communicate with a plant. That's true. But something as different as a cardboard box would never happen. But when HaKadosh Baruch Hu establishes the world, what does he establish? That two things that have nothing in common, that have no natural basis of communication, would be communicating. So that's step one. And that's a recap of what we talked about in the past. Hi, Bobby. How are you? That's a recap. How are you? Good to see you. The second point we built on that was based on the word elav and alav. If you remember, we spoke about elav when it was in reference to Abraham Avinu, and alav when it was in reference to Yaakov Avinu. And we said that Vaydaber Hashem elav, and God spoke to him, rather than saying God spoke to Abraham, meant to tell us that not only did God create the ability of heavens and the physical world to communicate, but with certain people, the communication was open-ended, like an open line that never got stinted, that never got shut. Okay, wow, big thing. So what do we got now? What do we have? We have that A, we can communicate. B, we can communicate on different levels, and certain people will have an open line of communication with God. Good. Then we qualified it a little further when we talked about last time or before, we talked about the idea of a name. We spoke about the concept of a name, and we said that even though Nevuah, prophecy, is no longer as we knew it, Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, still exists, and its most common expression is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu reaches into the mind of mommy and a daddy, and puts in their heads what the name of this neshama that God put into that body that belongs to their family, what that person should be called. That's Ruach HaKodesh. Okay, so let's see. Top line. The worlds can speak to each other. Drop down. But it's not democratic. You can have certain people communicate on an even higher level, which means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so invested in this relationship that he's willing to move further along with certain people and enable them to communicate on an even higher level. Then you have the period of the Nevi'im, of the prophets, and we know a Navi had to be a person of Kisharon, and a person of knowledge, a person who was not concerned about his or her financial needs. In other words, had his basic financial needs or hers met. Had to be a person, interestingly, and it goes back to where we started, had to be a person who also had an element of music in her life. We know from the book of Shemuel that Shemuel Hanavi would send the Nevi'im musicians to the training schools for young Nevi'im, young prophets, and they would play music outside the buildings because they were to be inspired by that. And we know that it continues on some level. So, do we have communication with God's world? Absolutely. Is it ongoing in varying degrees? Absolutely. Okay. So far, this is more or less a review. Now we're going to start to drill down. So stay with me and let's challenge it when we need to. The next level of this is called Hashgacha Peratit, divine providence. And some of us have spoken about this before. And we learned from Maimonides, from Harambam, that divine providence is not democratic, meaning the more a person challenges life, the more God pays attention to him. Again, you have a mediocre student and you have a student who works very hard. Naturally, the teacher is going to pay more attention to the more serious students. It's logical, it's natural. Same thing, Kivyachol, with God. You have a person who's killing through life, and you have a person who's reaching and trying and doing new things and looking for more inspiration and breaking through new glass ceilings. That's the person that's going to get more of God's attention. Now, when you get more of God's attention, it's a double-edged sword, as we know. You're going to be empowered to do more, and you're going to be challenged more. You're going to have more opportunities, and you're going to have more tests. But now when we drop down to this level, what do we see? Now when we drop down to this level, what do we see? We see that there is communication. It starts with the top people. It drops down to the next level. As you go further, we have a broader relationship, which is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can pay more attention to the people he'd like to. And as a result of that, those people will be scrutinized more and given more opportunity. So let's take a simple example. You have a person who retired, and you have a person who decides to keep working. You have a person who did their chesed and worked hard in chesed for decades, and now decides to take a step back. And you have the person who did chesed for decades and now decides to ramp it up because he or she is at a more serious place in life with all the experience that came before and can certainly offer more. God is drawn to the person who wants more, who's pushing harder. So terms like relaxing, stepping back, and so on are out of context to us as Jews, particularly in this conversation. Good? So we see Is there an opportunity for absolute communication with God? Yes. Is there a super high opportunity with some people? Yes. Is there an opportunity for all people? Yes. What happens with the communication at a certain point? Well, God is so invested in us that he makes a commitment that the more we do, the more he's in. Hashgacha pratit, remember the term, divine providence. The more you give, the more you get. The more you stretch, the more you get. The more you risk, the more you get. The more you're afraid at night because you made a big decision to do something big, to try a new act of chesed, to take on more learning, to try a new business opportunity. The more you do, the more you get. The more of God's attention you get. And when does this hashgacha pratit, divine providence relationship end? The last hour, the last day. Until that point, God continues to say, do more, try more, get more. Good. Now, let's keep moving. Who's unmute if you have a thought on this. Who is the exemplar in Torah? Let's be more specific. In Sefer Shemot, in the story of Bnei Israel leaving Egypt, who is the exemplar of this notion of doing more and getting more? What would you say?
Aaron?
Moshe.
Aaron?
Aaron?
I said
Moshe?
Aaron.
Give me more. Others.
Yeah.
Who else? Not a headliner. A number 2 level headliner.
Number 2.
Nachshon?
Who said it?
My mom.
All right, Bobby. Nachshon ben Aminadav. All right, let's see. Who is Nachshon? Nachshon is Aaron's brother-in-law, married to Aaron's sister.
That was close.
He married very high quality to begin with, and he is the head of the tribe of Yehudah. And as we know, even though Yehudah was not the oldest, under Nachshon's leadership, the tribe of Yehudah was considered the best, the leading tribe in the Jewish people. And when we have the korbanot that are brought, the sacrifices, Yehudah, even though he's not the oldest, brings his sacrifice first. Now, we know that Nachshon is whose grandpa? A little more trivia. Come on, Bobby, hit another one. Nachshon is whose grandpa? This is a very hard one. Sari, what do you say?
Yosef?
Not sure, not clear? Whose grandpa is Nachshon?
No, David.
Huh? Nachshon is Boaz's grandpa. Who's Boaz? Great one. All
From David.
right,
No.
beautiful. Boaz marries who?
Ruth.
Ruth, Moabiyah, right. Who comes from them?
David HaMelech.
David HaMelech. Beautiful, David. Who comes from him?
Mashiach.
Yeah.
Mashiach. Perfect. Wow. Nachshon, pretty great person, right? Right. What made Nachshon great? Zeke, let's go. What made Nachshon great?
Not my area.
Huh? What?
It's not my area.
Not your area. Okay, Bobby, you got one?
He jumped in.
He jumped in. Beautiful.
The one who
Beautiful.
jumped in, he's that guy. Okay.
He's that
Okay.
guy. He's the guy. As Bnei Israel is standing by the sea, right? And what is Moshe Rabbeinu doing at that point? What's the scene? What's the scene at that point? Who remembers? Who remembers the scene?
Standing at the edge and Paro is coming behind them.
The staff goes up, right?
Wall of
trapped.
fire.
They're trapped by the water. They have no other way to go, right? They have no other way to go. The waters are raging. The Egyptian army's coming. They can't turn to the right or the left. They can't go back, right? What is Moshe Rabbeinu doing?
He's lifting
What are
the
people doing?
staff.
By the way, what are the people doing? What are we all doing? We're
They're
panicking.
complaining they want to go back.
We're panicking.
They're complaining they want to go back.
We're crying and screaming and challenging Moshe Rabbeinu. What is Moshe Rabbeinu doing?
Turning to God.
Praying. He's praying, right? What does God tell him? He tells him, stop praying. Daber el bnei Israel vayisa'u. Stop. Turn to the Jewish people and tell them to go forward into the water. Now, What's the rub? Come on. Nachshon jumps into the water. The Jewish people are panicking. Moshe Rabbeinu was praying. What's the rub? When was he praying? What do you say? He was praying when Nachshon was in the water. Our rabbis say he was praying when Nachshon was already in the water.
But please don't let this guy die.
Huh?
Please don't let this guy die.
No, one saying, no. What is he praying? He's praying for, what should I do?
Why was he still praying?
Now, our rabbis say an interesting thing. They bring a couple of midrashim. One midrash says that while Nachshon was about to jump in or jumped in, the tribes were arguing amongst themselves and saying, I'm not going. Another version of that is that the individuals, every individual is arguing with the other individual saying, I'm not going. Who goes? Ignores all the back and forth. Nachshon, right? Who didn't even catch it? The greatest of men, Moshe, didn't even catch it. He didn't even get it. Even when Nachshon was in the water, he still doesn't get it. And he's still turning to God and pleading for direction. What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu tell him? Look, he did it. Go, just go. Now, good. And what does Nachshon earn for doing this? He earns to be great leader, great grandpa, great great grandpa, great 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 grandpa of the greatest people. Pretty good. So now we're learning something new. We have this dynamic situation. Heavens and earth, completely illogical. Even though a cardboard box can't communicate with a person, something completely non-physical, boundless can. Even though there's nothing logical that can make that make sense, we know it does. B, not only will God communicate, but he'll make an effort to communicate with certain people with an open line basis, that he never gets off the phone with them. B1, even though prophecy as we knew it is not now and will not come back until the time of Mashiach, there's still divine inspiration, Ruach HaKodesh, which we all get the benefit of. Drop down. Next, Hashgacha Pratit, which is divine providence, means that God cares about everybody, but he doesn't dispense that equally. He says, do more and get more of me. And again, as a person who sat in a classroom for many years, in a formal classroom, I'll tell you, when you're in a classroom with 35 kids, you can't give every kid the same attention. It's just not possible. Even though everybody says they do, it's not possible. Who gets more attention? The child who gets more attention is a child who's trying the hardest. That's the kid you're going to get behind, or kids. Those are the ones you're going to get behind. So, Kivyachol, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying the same thing. Can God give equal attention to everybody? Sure. But who does he want to give more attention to? He wants to give more attention to the person who's challenging life, to the person who says that emunah is an action, that belief is an action, it's not an emotion. Belief is an action. Belief means I get up and do. Good. Now we have another level that we add to this, which is the level of Mesirut Nefesh, of self-sacrifice. And who is epitomized to us? Nachshon ben Aminadav. Now you would say that he was a pretty great guy to begin with, because he led the greatest tribe in Israel, Dayenu. That would have been enough. But it's not enough, because he risked his life, because he knew that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted the Jewish people to get through the desert and to get to receive the Torah and to get to the land of Israel. And because he had a sense of what God's plan was, he took the leap and he risked his life. Okay, so far? Good? Good. Okay. I'm going to move a little bit over now. Okay? And tie it to Hanukka, and we'll start to pull our lessons out. I just muted a few more people. My apologies, because there was some background noise, but feel free to take it off whenever you want to speak. There's a beautiful midrash on the Hashmonaim that says the following. It says that when Matityahu Cohen, the father of these young men who go into battle against the greatest army in that part of the world at that point in time, tells his sons that let's rise up, because when we do, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to bring us miracles and we're going to triumph. Let's rise up and fight, because when we do, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to bring us miracles and we're going to triumph. Wow. Answer me, tell me, unmute those of you who'd like to. What did he say that was wrong in terms of Judaism? Huh? What do you say? Dave? Let's rise up and let's fight, because when we do, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to bring us a miracle. He's relying on a miracle. Thank you. He's relying on a miracle. What's the halacha? The halacha is that you're never allowed to rely on a miracle. Now here's Matityahu Cohen, who everybody says was a tzaddik, and his boys who were tzaddikim, who changed Jewish history, saved the Jewish people, and changed world history. And how can he make this flagrant type of mistake? So our rabbis try to figure it out. And this is all going to tie back to where we come. Our rabbis say, well, maybe when he said we're going to have miracles brought to us, he was talking about nes nistad, hidden miracles. And maybe a hidden miracle is something that a person can depend on. Maybe you can depend on a hidden miracle. You know, something that can be explained away through the laws of nature. Okay, we fought, they fought, we were more clever in fighting. So even though we were far fewer than them, we won. That's nes nistad, that's a hidden miracle. So some of the rabbis explain that when Matityahu says, come on, boys, let's fight. And guess what? When we do, God is going to bring us miracles. When he said that, he meant hidden miracles, subtle miracles, miracles that could be explained away with the laws of nature, and therefore it was okay. Our rabbis bring a few other sources and say, wait a minute, you can't depend on any miracle.
Wouldn't it be the opposite?
What, honey?
Wouldn't it be the opposite? Wouldn't it be that when you're in Torah and you're involved and you're constantly in the loop, then you have the ability to see the miracles versus someone who's not?
Right, beautiful. So you can see them, but can you depend on them? Can you say, I'm going to take my 13 people and go and fight the Assyrian Greek army, and we're going to beat them because God's going to give us a miracle? You can see the miracle, but can you depend on the miracle?
We're not allowed to
they thought they were
expect
going
from
to lose.
Hashem. We're not allowed to expect from Hashem in this regard.
What can we expect from Hashem in this regard?
No, I'm saying we're not allowed to expect from Hashem.
That's what it appears. Abe, what were you saying?
I don't think, my understanding is I didn't think they thought they were going to lose.
Exactly. But they knew they couldn't lose based on normal terms. He's very clear with that. He says the only way we're going to win is with a miracle. And let's go for it. How can he say that?
But you just got through saying that the more we do, the more Hashem expects from us.
That's right.
Yet, if the shoe doesn't go on the other foot, so to speak, right? So, we can't expect more from Hashem.
That's it. Beautiful. So to your point and Avi's point. So our rabbis answer in a very exciting way. Very exciting way. They say that when a person lives their normal Jewish life, they exist in this paradigm of malchut, which means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is involved with them, like we've talked about. You're going to get communication. It's going to be dynamic. It's going to be continual. You're going to draw God into your life. The more you do, the more you're going to get. And the more you get of his divine providence, the more protection you're going to get. And it's true, right? The more that we give, the more that we risk, the more that we express our emunah, our belief in action, the more protection we're going to get. The more removed we are from the laws of nature and the chaos of the world. But there's another level. And for our purposes, we could call it the Nachshon level or the almost Nachshon level, which is that when a person risks something for Torah, for Judaism, then he has every right to depend on a miracle. That's the grand slam point here. That when you risk for Torah, when you risk for Am Yisrael, for Torah Yisrael, for Eretz Yisrael, you can say, God, listen, I'm risking everything, Nachshon style. You need to come back at me the way I'm coming at you.
But Ricky, that never really, I mean, we've seen so many stories like Hanan, Shiva Baneha. She risked her life and all her kids. I mean, and we see that a lot.
That's right. That's right. That's right. We've seen times that it works and times that it seemingly doesn't. That's right.
Yeah.
True. We can't say
Days older
we
than me.
don't know. We can't say we don't know that every time a person risks his or her something, they got paid the way they should have. We can't say that. We can't. You're right. You're right. Let's go a little bit further, and then we're going to circle back to your point.
But wait, what you brought out before, Nachshon versus Moshe. Nachshon did action, Moshe was afraid. So now, Nachshon got rewarded for having the trust in Hashem that he would bail him out.
Right.
And I think in our lifetime that's happened. I mean, just the creation of the state of Israel is something where, like Nachshon jumping into the water, who would expect in
Right.
more independence for a handful of people with no weapons to defeat armies.
Right.
So that, to me, that shows that the action is more important than the prayers, and that's the way we should behave. And can we count on it indefinitely? Maybe not. But I think our actions have to be, perceived in that manner, that we're going to go forward with that. Otherwise, we're doomed.
Beautiful, beautiful. So in fact, to your point, just as anecdotally, they call the effort to get to the old city of Jerusalem when it was encircled during the War of Independence, they called it Mitzah Nachshon, the Nachshon effort, the Nachshon brigade, the Nachshon drive. Fantastic. They still use that often in the Israeli army. So let's see. We're going to say that in let's say for now that action, and I don't want to limit it to this because certain times prayer is going to be very important as well. But we're going to say that action is more important than prayer. But it's not necessarily the case, although in this case it certainly was true. It's Mesirut Nefesh is more important than practice. In other words, what would you, and please unmute, what would you call your commitment to a spouse or a child? What would you call it? You'd call it unequivocal. You'd call it unconditional. You'd say, I'll do anything for my child. Anything. Of course. What do you mean? I'll do anything. We don't qualify our commitments to our children or our spouses, people we love. We never qualify those commitments, right? But with God, we do. What am I saying? That we practice Judaism. We keep mitzvot. But how often, and I raise my hand first, how often do we do something on a level, and I'm not talking about jumping into the water. God didn't ask us for that. right? I wish, but he didn't. What he asked is, if we're going to extend this into our lives, he says, listen, rather than kill yourself for something. When was the last time in any of our lives, where we killed ourselves metaphorically for something in Judaism? Now, would you kill yourself for a chesed organization to get it going? Yeah, maybe that's a blurry line. Let's leave that out. Would you go all the way for a child? Would you kill yourself for your business to get your business going? People work day and night. Sure, it's expected. It's part of our culture. But do we have any of the Nachshon thing when it comes to Judaism? Are we practicing Judaism, or are we giving it up for God? Are we moving? Are we sacrificing? That's the question. I think for most of us, and again, I'll raise my own hand, I love Judaism intensely. I thank God more than once a day for putting me in this unique, exclusive club and not anywhere else. I love Judaism and want it and feel incredibly blessed by it. And I'm very committed. I'm committed to learning. I'm committed to chesed. I'm committed to halacha. But did I kill myself for something? Did I go out of my way? Did I break my head? Did I feel like I was mentally breaking my brains over an idea? Not really, not that often. So, the point of tonight's learning is we got that special dispensation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu communicating with us. We got the criteria that the more we do, the more of his attention we get. But then there's that gold ring that's there that we can have. And it's a function of saying, I want this thing in Judaism, and I'm going to break my head to get it. I'm going to really sacrifice to get it. And I don't know, where have we really sacrificed? And again, I'm raising my hand first. I love Judaism. I love learning. Sari, go ahead.
Like, what do you mean, like sacrificing? Like, I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Excellent. So I want to give you 3 or 4 criteria. Any other thoughts or questions before we go into what we mean by sacrificing?
I was going to say, but that negates it. Look at like Masada. They sacrificed everything, and look
Right.
what
They ended it. By the way, they're not judged favorably in Judaism. They're not judged favorably. It's very beautiful and emotional, but they're not judged favorably for what they did, So let's see, what are we talking about? There are 3 or 4 practical, very sort of straightforward steps I think we can talk about here. The first one is discipline. Just simple discipline, meaning I believe that learning is important. I believe that Hesed is important. I believe that Halakha is important. I am going to discipline myself I said I'm going to learn at 9 till 9:15 every day. Nothing will take that time away from me, period. And if it means life is a little more complicated, life is a little more stressed, that's fine. That's step 1. Step 1 of Mesirut Nefesh, of sacrificing for Judaism, means I'm inconvenienced. And that inconvenience brings with it a discipline. Meaning, let's say, for example, somebody had to take a medication. And the doctor prescribed the medication every day, right? You have to take these 2 pills every day, right? Would anything stop you from taking them? Nothing. No matter what. No matter what's going on, you're going to take them. Why? Because you've put your faith in this thing. You have confidence in this person and his protocol. And as a result of that, whatever you do will find time to commit to this, to to actualize this. So the first thing we talk about in terms of Mesirut Nefesh, of sacrificing, is very practical. It means I put a list together, a short list of those things in Judaism that I know are very important and are particularly important to me. I schedule them and I have the discipline to keep them. And sometimes that means that I give up other things. How many of us, and again, I raise my hand first, ever give up anything for Judaism? We're inconvenienced, but to give something up, and again, to David's point, we're not even talking about putting our lives on the line for the state of Israel and the people of Israel. Halavai, we never had that opportunity. But we have a zillion others. I'm going to learn Hilchot Shabbat. It's hard. It's not so exciting. But Shabbat is the emphasis of everything in Judaism. It's the central point of everything we are and we want and we think. So you know what? I'm going to have the discipline. And that discipline translates into self-sacrifice. That's Mesirut Nefesh. Good? Sarah, you okay with that? You're not so okay with that? All right, let's hear it.
No, like you're talking about like learning.
I'm not talking about learning. You're right. I'm talking about that in reference to anything. Learning, doing, trying.
Like, would you consider giving ma'aser? Would you say that's considered sacrificing or?
Sure it is. If I'm not, and if I need to discipline I'll tell you what I would consider in terms of ma'aser. I'll tell you what. There was one organization I was involved with a handful of years ago, and there was a small organization and very, very limited financially, very limited. And when a few of us got involved, we found that the financial situation was desperate. And what a few people did, one person mortgaged his house, a guy with 5 kids, mortgaged his house and gave the money to the school. Another person borrowed money at 15% interest because he couldn't get regular loans at that point in time and gave the money to the school. Most of you know both of these people. Now, is that reckless? I don't know, maybe what Nachshon did was reckless. But if the person is able-bodied and he can swim, or able-bodied and he can work, then maybe he puts the mortgage and he works harder and he gives the money to something he believes in. So the discipline we're talking about can refer to anything. It's really, I would use the flip term of discipline / commitment. And it means I'm going to reach far and high. And I'm going to put something at risk. It could be my convenience, as simple as my convenience. It could be my time. It doesn't have to be borrowing a lot of money, but it means that I'm putting something at risk. I'm fighting with myself to stay true to this thing. That's what the term discipline would reference. How do you feel about that? You okay with that so far? Okay, I'm going to give you the second term. Second term is kavanah, or concentration. How would you reference this in the context of Mesirut Nefesh? Concentration or kavanah. It's an extension of discipline, no, Sari?
Like being like very, very focused and
being totally in the moment, being totally focused in the moment.
Things, not letting anything
Being very
go.
mindful, exactly, mindful, great. Mindful and in the moment. Now, a lot of what we do in Judaism, we do, and we love it. And when we think back on it, we say how gifted we are to have it, but we're not fully mindful of it. We're not deeply in the moment when it's happening. So how can we, on our level, just step over that threshold to go from practicing Jews to sacrificing Jews? That's what we're talking about tonight. We want to take our version of the Hashmonai story. How do we do it? A, we create a plan and we fight with ourselves to stick with it and to do it, and we sweat and we rationalize and we push. How many of us are doing that in terms of Jewish things? We don't do it. We keep Shabbat, we keep Kashrut, we do everything, but where are you reaching? Where are you stretching? Where are you fighting with yourself? If you're not fighting with yourself, Rav Soloveitchik used to say, you're not growing. If you don't have that push and pull, you're not reaching. So the first step of Mesirut Nefesh, of sacrifice, is discipline. The second step is kavanah, or mindfulness, or being in the moment. And the third step, our rabbi suggests, is also something seemingly simple. Some people call it bitachon. In English, we'd call it patience, which means that when I am being Moseh Nefesh for something, I'm looking at a long trajectory. I'm looking at a horizon. Rabbi Tala from the Yeshiva Flatbush High School told me many years ago, he says, you want to teach? Don't look for anything in less than 20 years. He says, in teaching, you have to teach for a generation to see the fruits of it. I was 30 years old. I thought that was insane, but I understand it now. So when you Moseh Nefesh, did Nachshon know what would happen? Did he know what his grandchildren and great-grandchildren would become? He couldn't know. He didn't know. But he knew at that moment what he could do. And he had the self-love, apparently, and the love of God to say, I'm going to be patient. And I know that time will make all this more right than it even is now.
So he was working on brownie points, Ricky.
I don't know. What do you mean by brownie points? What does that mean?
You're saying that he was playing the long game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
but keep going. Yeah.
He's playing the long game. It's not immediate. It's not defined. It's not clear.
That's right. That's right.
But it's happening. Something good's going to come from this. That's for sure.
That's right. And that's the hardest thing. I'm going to break my head over the Hilchot Shabbat. And you know when I'm going to get it? It's going to take me years to master all the laws of Shabbat. It's going to take me months to master the different insights about how a person acts when they wake up in the morning. Who wants to do that? What do you mean? I'm not going to own this thing for 3 years? Go ahead, Sari.
Like, do you think Nachshon was looking for reward when he just jumped into the water?
Fantastic. I don't know. And that's what's so exciting about the Midrash on Matitya HaKohen. Because he said, we're going to depend on miracles and we're going to win. We're going to win. We're going to get the reward. And that was okay. So it means, and that's the great insight and the thing that blows our head over here. You're absolutely right. When you're willing to be Moseh Nefesh, to sacrifice, discipline, concentration, patience, you have the right to look forward to the reward. You have the right to look forward to the miracle. That's what our rabbi struggled with. And that's what they came around to. That by doing this type of thing, you draw God in on a different level. And based on that, he's willing to shake up the laws of nature for you. Yes, Harry.
Like, do you think the reward is simply the act of Nachshon jumping in, like that courage, versus like the reward that his future offspring would be the Mashiach? You know,
I think it's a beautiful question. And my personal perspective is that it's both. I think reward part A is the fact that he could jump in the water and he was that level person. And that means that if you start learning Hilchot Shabbat or whatever you start doing, or somebody mentioned the Maaser question. And so what would the challenge be with charity, with Maaser? It would be not giving 10%, giving 15, giving 17, which is what a person is supposed to be doing. 10% is the bare minimum. Our rabbis don't applaud 10%. They say a person should give as much as he can, more if possible, but don't give more than 20. But get as close as you can. Now, for someone to give 10, maybe they've already reconciled themselves to it. But to give 12 or 13 or 15, that's not so easy. That's Mesirut Nefesh. That's sacrifice. So I think to your question, it's both. On the one hand, I become more just by struggling with this. I become more just by struggling with it. And I certainly become more by doing it. And then once I become more, it makes sense that my children should be more, that my grandchildren should be greater. It makes sense because I'm much different.
You know, Ricky, it's hard. If you asked me 20 years ago, it would be even less. I would say to you, if I got somebody promised me that somebody down the line, great grandson would be something, I don't know how much at that, the older I get, the more I can appreciate that.
Right.
But I have to imagine that that's not really.
It's not. You're right.
At the forefront of people's minds when they think of reward.
Right. That's just the extra. That's the mimanavshach. That's the perot. That's what should happen. But that's really not our focus. You're right. Nachshon was doing what he felt was right for Nachshon.
Wait a second. And also, was it dangerous? What did he jump into?
Of course he did. It was raging waters. The way
raging waters. White water.
Otherwise, they would have all strolled in.
It wasn't.
Who told? Why did Nachshon think to jump in? Meaning, did Hashem tell them to jump into the water, or was it his own idea that I have nowhere else to go? Let me go into the water.
It's a great question. It must be based on the midrash that I quoted, where one midrash says that the Shevatim were arguing, and one midrash says that each individual is arguing. It must be that the direction was clear that they had to go through the water.
But Moshe was praying. Moshe was praying for an unknown answer.
He was praying to say, I don't know what to do. The water is raging, the people are fighting and screaming, and I don't know what to do.
So it went over his head what the answer was. Right? I don't like to say it like that, but that's what happened.
That's the shock. So, Stephen, to your point, that it's clear that was what had to be done at that time. That's clear. But to Zeke's point, it didn't get out to everybody, and including Moshe Rabbeinu, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is terse with him. He says, Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'yisau. What are you praying for? Get moving. Now's not the time for that. There's another important element, and we'll pull it all together with this. There's another important element that we need to consider in terms of mastering something and sacrificing for something, and that is the concept of humility. Some of us have talked about this before. What is anava or humility? What does it mean? What does anava mean? And what doesn't it mean? Who is the most anav of all? We know, right? Who is the most anav of all people? Most humble?
Moshe.
Good. So how do people typically translate the word anav?
Humble.
How, David?
Humble, I don't know. Isn't it?
Humble, meaning what? What's another word for humble? Meek, shy, right? A humble person is typically meek,
reserved,
shy, or reserved. Beautiful. Was Moshe any of those
modest
things? Modest, right? It gives you a sense of softness and weakness, and that Moshe was none of those things. Moshe was a fighter. Moshe was a warrior. Moshe goes to war with his people. Moshe goes to war with God, right? After Chet HaEgel, and he goes to war with God. Yeah. So Moshe was anything but meek, anything but soft. So when it says that Moshe was the most anav of all people, it's saying a different point. And some of us have spoken about this. It's saying that anav doesn't mean meek or humble. Anav means open and curious and learning and a perpetual student with a childlike sense of wonder. That's anav. So you want to be a person who's Moseh Nefesh? You want to take one of the key lessons of Hanukka. You want to emulate the Matitya Cohen message to his sons of rise to a certain level, and you can depend on even more of God's support. Let's add to that not only is there discipline, not only is there concentration, not only is there patience, but there's this perspective of I gotta keep learning and keep growing. You know, one of the most painful things that I hear from people from time to time is I am who I am. At this point in my life, I'm not going to change. It literally breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. Whoever is who they are, I don't know who I am. I know what I love. I know what I care about. I know what I hope to grow into. Do I want to be stagnant in a certain place? I certainly never want that. I want to continue to grow and say, you know what? I know who I am today, but tomorrow I hope to become more. For someone to say, don't push me on this. I am who I am. I do what I do. I like what I like. What are you talking about? That's the antithesis of what we're learning tonight. So, to wrap it all up, and then we'll open for some final questions. This notion of an interconnectedness between our world and absolutely spiritual world, Grand Slam, works. The notion that different people can reach different levels, as epitomized by Abraham and Yaakov, Grand Slam, works. The fact that God continued in this thing after Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, the period of the greatest of greats, after the period of the great prophets, and is still in our lives, yes. The fact that Hashgacha Pratit is a real thing and do more, get more, yes. But then there's this, I can't use other word other than gorgeous perspective that HaKadosh Baruch Hu offers, which is, generally speaking, we're in a Malchut zone where do good stuff, you have my attention, I'm going to push you around when you have my attention, but you're going to achieve great things. But if you're willing to sacrifice, and again, halavai, we should put ourselves on the front line and against an enemy in the state of Israel. We weren't, if we were meant to do that, we would have been put over there. We would have been living there, but we were placed here, which means we have the opportunity to be Moser Nefesh.
Still is getting nothing in. Do you see where the gray is?
We have the opportunity to sacrifice here, to be disciplined, to be focused and concentrated deeply in the moment, to be patient, to set long, hard goals and make them work based on a day-to-day commitment, and to stay curious and open. That's Mesirot Nefesh in our context, and that brings with it this remarkable light that we understand that the Maccabim and Hashmonaim brought into our world. Any other thoughts, questions?
Yeah.
Sonny?
So can you go back to the point of prayer versus action? We talked about it briefly before.
Very important point.
Action trumping prayer. In the beginning, I was thinking to myself, like, okay, find that balance of the two. But it seems like now it's the action that's trumping the prayer.
So it's a very important point. So I want to give it an example, and it's a little bit of a painful example, so I apologize, but I think it's a cogent, important example. You know, God forbid somebody gets sick, right? God forbid somebody gets sick. We have a very special thing in the community where we call it Tehillim reading. And because our community is spectacular and really unparalleled, 300-400 people will show up with an hour's notice, unprecedented. Mm-hmm. And it's very, very special. And prayer on an intense and serious level moves and shakes the heavens, no question about it. But what would be infinitely more effective than that would be if those 300 people, or 200, or 100, or 10, would change their lives for the zechut of that person. Right. Would say, you know what? I'm going to learn more Torah. I'm going to do more chesed. I'm going to keep this mitzvah. And by the way, nobody's going to tell any of us which mitzvah to keep. We're not talking about any of that stuff. That's not serious. Everybody knows himself and herself. So if God forbid there's a gezerah in the heavens against somebody, or somebody's going through a difficult time, Words have power, and we know that words can change reality. But if it's an action, there's what could be stronger than an action going right at it? Probably nothing. And in a difficult time, lo aleinu, we should be praying, but we should be acting. We should be changing. We should be challenging with real action, because Kivyachol, if you think about it from God's perspective, he says, beautiful. They all came together for an hour to pray. That's really beautiful. And it is. And it can't be minimized. It's unique and beautiful. And it's up there. And by the way, maybe in certain cases, it blows those gates of the Shamayim open. But logically, practically, how much more serious is it when people change their lives to get a change in this gezerah? Where people do take on something, where people improve in an area, where they sacrifice, where they moved their comfort zone in order to bring about something better in another person's life. That's infinitely more meaningful. Good?
Thank you.
So sometimes I think we lost the point. For instance, we all get together, Ricky, I don't.
Yeah, I'm listening. Yeah.
Okay. And we all get together and we add more people's names to the list of Tehillim. And we read it. But in my mind, I keep thinking we're reading it as a group so that maybe we'll call that person's family and say, do you need anything? Can I do anything for you? What, of course, the reading is fine, but it really, that should be the minimal part of what
I agree.
And we
I don't
miss
think
a lot of points in the religion with these type of things. We take the simple way out. Yeah, we'll read Tehillim and we, great.
It should move us to action. I agree with that
That's
100%.
exactly tonight's point, Sarah. That's exactly tonight's point. Serious action, uncomfortable action, growth-related action is where it's at.
Right.
And we should never say, I am who I am. This is who I am. I'm X years old. I don't change. What are you talking about?
If you're not growing, you're dying. That's it.
This is HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you another day. So you're right. The Tehillim chats are very beautiful and should be continued. But that should be the baseline. And if you want to get stuff done, challenge the heavens with actions and stand before HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say, listen, there's a negative thing on this person, God forbid. But you know what? We're going to have a fight right now. I'm jumping into the water, so to speak, because I want to show you through my actions how much I care about this person and how much I want to change. And what does that mean? I'm going to sacrifice. I'm going to discipline myself. I'm going to be in the moment. I'm going to compromise. I'm going to stay with it for an extended period of time. And I'm going to keep myself wide open for any iterations that will make this thing better.
Beautiful.
Good. Great. Any other thoughts? Good.
I'm not so happy with it anymore.
No, because people don't explain it right. Ezu Asher Sameach B'Chalko means who is
happy with your God.
He knows who he is. Now, who is the wealthy man? The person who knows who he is. Now, if you know who you are, to our conversation tonight. If you know who you are, you're not copacetic. You're not standing still.
You know who you were.
Right? You're certainly charged to move. So the biggest trick is to know who we are, to know what we have, to know what we're capable of. That's the big one. That's what Matikah taught. Great.
Thank you.
All right. Great to see you all.
Thank you, Ricky.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ricky. Very good.
Thank you, Ricky.
Thank you, Ricky.
Tag Sameach.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you. Sarah, thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome.